Welcome back to the VariantCast. I am your prime variant, Michael Ford. Flying a little solo this week, but I am here in my own personal void to break down the penultimate episode of the Loki Marvel um, Disney Plus series entitled Journey into Mystery. Like I said, I'm in the void, joined by the child version of myself, the older version of myself, the crocodile version of myself, and, well, I guess I am the black version of myself. But nevertheless, I am here warring with myself like our protagonist did in this fifth episode. And we're gonna see how it goes as I am left alone with my thoughts as the god of outcasts myself. And yeah, I mean, I'm gonna give you my thoughts about the fifth episode, which I'm sure you're all dying to hear if you've been tuning in from week to week. As always, this is a spoiler episode, so if you have not seen the episode, you need to pause that shit and watch it. Come on back, and then you can pretend to be talking to me while I talk into the void. So speaking of the void, let's talk about what happened at the end of the last episode where we had our Loki get pruned, and come to find out, pruning does not mean getting murdered or eradicated, or at least not directly so. Loki, our main character Loki, wakes up only to be surrounded by what they've been calling classic Loki, wearing the old green and yellow Marvel 616 style uniform, played by Richard E. Grant. There's Bloki, or as they refer to, boastful Loki. I understand why they called him boastful Loki and not Black Loki, played by Diobia Apare. And then there's a kid Loki, played by Jack Veal. And not to be forgotten is alligator Loki or crocodile Loki, depending on whether that's a knife or this is a knife. And he tried to steal the show this week, but there were so many other Lokis. We were also joined by President Loki. And we got a little Loki on Loki, well, not that kind of Loki on Loki action, Loki on Loki fight action, as a brawl broke out between the Lokis, as predicted by yours truly. Lokis, generally speaking, would stab each other in the back, and can never get right for that reason. They don't trust one another. They're not trustworthy people, and they have all this self-loathing to go along with their narcissism. And our Loki, the protagonist Loki, broke that pattern, broke that trend, and you could see the visible disgust on his face as he both saw a little bit of himself in all these characters, but then saw why he himself couldn't get right and was almost destined for failure. He's also somewhat pining for his well, I'll say love, but maybe not exactly. Sylvie, who, as we jump from scene to scene, Sylvie is still in the TVA trying to get answers from Judge Renslayer. As interrogations go, it's not the best interrogation, because Renslayer is clearly running game on her. Obviously, she knows a little bit more than she's letting on, but a little bit less than we expected, I think. I was one of the people who assumed that Renslayer was in on the gag, in on the betrayal, that was the fact that the timekeepers were not real and were just Memorex, so to speak. But in this episode, she definitely played it as the wool was pulled over her eyes as well. And I gotta say, I don't know, she seemed like smarter character than that, than to be fooled by a little bit of animatronics. But nevertheless, that was her story, and she stuck to it, that she too wants to get to the bottom of what the mystery is. And for a second there, may have had us fooled as to whether she was going to form an alliance with Sylvie. But as is her way, duplicity played out, and she was able to get the upper hand on Sylvie, causing Sylvie to. I'm not really sure about the mechanics of this. She self pruned, but she was still able to take the temp pad with her as she self pruned. I'm not really sure that they ever established that that was possible, but we rolled with it. So Sylvie goes into, she learned from Renslayer that this void is a place that is near the end of time, but not quite at the end of time. And it's a place that essentially all the errant matter, the things that they can't fully eradicate, they go to be consumed by a being that we learn is called, I want to say, Alioth. Yes, it's almost like Goliath, but with an A, um, who looks conveniently like the smoke monster from Lost if he leveled up quite a few times. And and so in this place, Alioth basically eats your reality. I guess they needed to send all the beings and all of the leftovers from the pairings into this place, this void, and let Alioth do its thing. But as it does its thing, it doesn't completely leave everything scathed, as it were, because we have our surviving Lokis, and they have a little home base. And there they tell their stories. There, our prime Loki, finds out about what made a couple of them become variants. They never found out why Black Loki became the variant. However, he would have us believe that he defeated all the Avengers and also stole the Infinity Gauntlet, and that's a likely story as far as I'm concerned. But at the end, we learn about Elder Loki, classic Loki, and the fact that he lived beyond his destiny. He used his considerably leveled up spell casting ability to cast illusions to fool Thanos into believing that he had killed him so that he could escape. And he goes to live out his days in solitude, and that basically keeps him out of the ire of the TVA because he didn't really step out of his predetermined loop too much, not enough to cause enough ripple in the timeline. But the minute that he decides that he's tired of being alone, believe me, I can relate. He steps out of line. The TVA brings him in. They prune him, and he is considerably embittered as he's stuck. We're not really sure whether he's one of the first Lokis in this league of Lokis, as I termed it, but we do know that he's definitely the most grizzled and definitely the most seasoned. We learn that Kid Loki, his step out into variant verse came from killing Thor. So, I mean, there you have it. I mean, he established his badassery. He also established his ability to conjure a sword. And later in the episode, he gives that sword to Loki. Now, we don't know how enchanted the sword is, but we may find out. And then Crocodile Loki ate a cat. And, we don't know which cat it was. We don't know if it was Chewie. I'm sorry, not Chewie. If it was Goose, as it were. But maybe we can find out. Maybe it was the cat from the TVA. Hey, callback. But Crocodile Loki gets a little bit of gets his comments and doesn't get subtitled. I feel like it would have been better. It would have been more fun if Crocodile Loki got some subtitles in there. But ultimately, boastful Loki, Black Loki, kind of screws them, which is very disappointed from the Black person's perspective to have the most untrustworthy of the untrustworthy Lokis be the Black one who sells them out in exchange for. I mean, you gotta drive a harder bargain than that. You can't trust that the President Loki is gonna put you in charge. So I mean, it didn't really happen. So it turned into a low-key all-out brawl in which Classic Loki used his powers, his conjuring, his illusion powers to engineer an escape for protagonist Loki, Kid Loki, and Croco Loki, and they go back out into the void, where Loki hatches, I gotta say, a pretty half-baked plan to try to kill uh, Alioth. However, our friend Sylvie wakes up in the void. Let's hear it for the void. And she is joined by Mobius, still alive. And they joined forces, which is kind of cool. Not on a jet ski. You know, it would have been nice if he ended up on the jet ski. Maybe we're saving that for episode 6. But he's driving around in an old clunker. And small world, as it were, a few minutes later, uh, they link up with our Loki, our team of Lokis, and they decide Sylvie's plan, because she happened to have very limited interaction with Alioth. She believes that she can enchant Loki. Enchant Alioth. So she, of course, after a little bit of ribbing towards our Loki, explains that her plan is superior to his plan, and he ultimately goes along with it. But not before an additional plan is hatched, whereby Mobius decides that he's going to go back. He's got the tempad from Sylvie, and he's going to go back to the TVA and burn it down in a great callback to the first episode. And they have a nice little bro hug. Our Loki and Mobius, they may never see each other again. I mean, they probably will, but they may never see each other again in their minds. So they give each other a hug. They call each other friends, and Mobius is off to potentially close this TVA loop. Meanwhile, Mobius had given the other Lokis the opportunity to escape to the TVA, but surprisingly, both Kid Loki and Classic Loki decide no, they're gonna fight for the little bit of land that they have, little home that they have in the void, which is questionable. But what that ultimately leads to is Classic Loki, perhaps inspired by the friendship, kinship, love, whatever you want to call it, between Loki and Sylvie. He decides to make the noble sacrifice as he creates the diversion that is necessary to allow both Lokis at this time to use their enchanting ability to sync up with Alioth, the smoke monster, as it were. And they find that there's a castle behind, man in the time castle, potentially, in this next episode. And so that was basically the freeform recap of what happened in the episode. I mean, I think it's good enough to potentially talk about some of the themes of this episode. Some people had thought that not a lot happened in terms of plot, but I disagree. I think that we had a lot of things get debunked. Like I said before, we know now that Renslayer has her own agenda. She also met up with Hunter B20, who, switched sides, so to speak. And Hunter B20 wants to tell the whole TVA about the fraud that is the Timekeepers. But Renslayer, committed still to the cause, wants to maintain the illusion, maintain the lie, die on the lie, as they say, those of you who are Wire fans. But she also wants to get to the bottom of the mystery of the Timekeepers. Probably not to slay the whoever is behind the Timekeeper fraud, but just to get an insight into what the thought process is. But it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out with B20, Hunter B20, as she will probably link up with Mobius when Mobius comes back in, and maybe she'll make a stronger fight showing than in that scene from the last episode where she got jobbed out a little bit, just a little bit. Additionally, we go back to the Loki Sylvie ship that I've been captaining the ship for a little while, and we got some decent chemistry. We got some awkward moments of where they both acknowledged that there was a little bit of a spark there. They both acknowledge that neither one is used to having someone else, and you get that moment where they say, "Who knows where the future may bring, but they will decide it together." My spidey sense says that when typically two characters profess that they're going to, face the future boldly together, there's probably a good chance that one of them's going to bite it. That is my prediction for next week. I don't want to see that. I would love to see them, go off into the sunset together, holding hands, and you know, living out their life, whether it's in the prune universe or whether they're in a new universe. But I would love for there to be true love among Loki love, but something tells me one of them probably. Well, you know what? I'm gonna. I'll leave it to the listener to decide which one. Maybe I'll make a poll. Who lives and who dies between Prime Loki and Sylvie, because they're probably not gonna both make it out. But we still had our tender moment. We had Loki first conjuring a blanket for himself and offering to conjure one for Sylvie, and then realizing, as any gentleman would, that you should always conjure the blanket for the both of them. But in Sylvie fashion, she did complain about the blanket not being snuggly enough, and I gotta admit, it didn't look very snuggly. But yeah, they're the chemistry continues to ripple or continues to crackle for them. We haven't yet gotten our kiss. Will we get a kiss? I'll also maybe I'll leave that for the reader as well, for the listeners as well. Crocodile Loki is still out there somewhere. Maybe he'll show up in a post-credit scene. But let's talk a little bit more about the arc. Obviously we met Richard E. Grant's classic Loki in the post-credit stinger of the last episode, but we didn't really get his story until this episode. There's something to the idea of an older man who has lived a life and looks back kind of regretfully at the choices that he made, and having the sense that he was never destined for anything better than what he became, only to find within himself that glorious purpose that eluded him for his entire life. I thought it was fairly triumphant of him that he was able to conjure his homeland, conjure Asgard, for one final push in helping his other Lokis succeed in their plan. I think his last words were, in fact, glorious purpose, as he gyrated at the camera. But if you're gonna go out, go out like a hero, I say. Now, we don't find out what happened to Kid Loki. Maybe he'll find a way into the main universe. Maybe he'll find a way to get some mischief going. We don't really know if he regrets killing Thor. I'd like to believe that he does, but his story is still to be told. Perhaps in a Young Avengers show. Mm-hmm. What else? More missed minutes. We got a lot of missed minutes this episode. Probably the most missed minutes that we've gotten. I don't know what that means. Does Miss Minutes have a nefarious agenda? Is she going to is she the face behind the shadiness of the TVA? Some had speculated that it was her. Um, she seemed a lot more like an operating system, a lot more like Clippy this episode. But she occasionally chimed in with her southern sensibilities. So it still remains to be seen whether Miss Minutes has her own dark, twisted agenda, or whether she's just kind of playing along as part of the cast of characters. I think it would be kind of fun if Miss Minutes emerged as some kind of nefarious force. But we did have a lot of things come into shape in terms of some of our theories. Still no Kang. There were definitely people who were saying that it would be interesting if there was a Loki behind it all, and I'm of divided minds there because I think that I think that Loki um, has proven himself to be quite the foil, both in the sense of how how our Loki sees himself, and how he sees these sort of twisted mirrors of himself, both as who the villain that he thought Sylvie was, and the just the incompetence that came from the leagues of Loki. Can we sustain another Loki? Maybe a superior Loki that's behind it all? Perhaps. It depends on how the actor plays it, which the actor probably being Tom Hiddleston. Um, but a lot of people put their money behind Kang. A lot of people want to see Kang. I'm in the Kang would be nice camp. Kang is not necessary, but Kang would be nice. But I'm steeling myself against the possibility that we will not get Kang in the final episode. But I still want to know a little bit more about the mechanics of the TVA. I mean, they set up this multiversal war, and I'd like to believe that this multiversal war is inevitable. If we're looking towards this next big saga that will happen after the Infinity Saga, what better saga than this multiverse saga or the secret war offshoot? Obviously, I doubt it's going to encompass all of the elements of the Secret War story that we got in the comics from Hickman. There were so many moving parts there, but I could still imagine there being a multiversal, multi-timeline war that spins out of this, even if it's not directly referenced in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. We'll know we'll know that these are somehow related. I mean, that's personally what I'd like to see. I'd like to see the TVA, do a little bit more talking about its origins, particularly when they reveal the man behind the curtain, if it's even a man. What else? That may be maybe all I have for you guys. I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna see if we got a little feedback from our listeners and from our various low key chats, and see if there are any talking points worth discussing before we shut it down. There were a lot of Easter eggs in this episode. Apparently, the old Thanos helicopter that you might have remembered from the comics. He was one of the things littered in the void. There was also a frog in a jar marked T365, which was Thor 365, was a Frog Thor story. What else? Uh, Looks like there was Kang Tower, spelled with a Q, which is often associated with Kang. That's another Kang Easter egg. Once again, the smoke monster, as I will probably title this episode, Loki and Sylvie definitely wanted the smoke this week. Additionally, I teased for some of the listeners, some of the people who follow on social media, that I was going to drop my worst pun of all time. So I may as well get that off right now, in that the two of them were in the prune universe. Loki and Sylvie was there a possibility from Loki to get some prunani? Yeah, I know it's awful. Cancel me now. But we can do better. We can do better in the future. We can do better with better puns. Let's see. President Loki, lost in hand, which that's a common running theme in MCU shows when they do, or movies and shows where they do an homage to Empire Strikes Back. Nice of them to slide that in there real quick. Lost a hand via Crocodile Loki. There was a question that went around from Marvel Unlimited. Is a group of Lokis called a mischief? I don't know. Mischief of Lokis. I feel like we can do better. But yeah, I mean, there was a lot of emotional growth from our Loki. He finally kind of realizes that it's the love that he had, and the fact that he constantly betrayed everyone that he loved, and he wants to do better. He knew that he had done wrong, and he's trying to take that first step. I thought it was interesting that he mentioned his brother and he mentioned his father, but he didn't mention his mother. Maybe it was because it was too painful to acknowledge that betraying his mother kind of hurt most of all. But he also said he betrayed Asgard, which in a way he did, particularly because it led to Thanos getting the Tesseract and wiping out half the universe. Although Loki doesn't know that because he died. He dead. I still think that there was maybe not enough time to really get into the nuances of Sylvie seeing bits of herself in these other Lokis. I guess it's important because we have our prime Loki as our protagonist. It's important that he experiences growth and then channel that growth towards Sylvie to make her more amenable to just letting the love happen, so to speak, letting the bond between the two come to pass, as it were. But yeah, I mean, I guess we hit all of the main points. Next week I'll make sure to solicit more observations from the listeners and from the various people that we follow, that follow us rather on social media. We'll get a more robust discussion. I'm sure people will join us next week, and we'll have a lot to discuss because it will be the finale, not the series finale, because there's it's been confirmed that there will be a season two. I don't know what that means for resolution, whether we'll get one arc of resolution or whether we'll get full on resolution and then maybe a restart of a new arc. Um, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you think will represent a satisfying resolution for this season of Loki, and I'll ask for it ahead of time so that whoever gets closest to it will get something akin to a no prize. I am here, every week. Well, not every week because the show's about to end, but you can expect more from the Racial Draft Podcast Network. We will definitely be doing a Black Widow spoiler review in the next couple days, so go ahead and watch that movie, whether it's in the theaters or on Disney Plus. You can always show up. You can always support us on our mothership, the Racial Draft Podcast, where we do the racial drafting. That's kind of how we got our name. We, as they say, change the complexion of the comic book universe one draft pick at a time. And, we're in the throes of our third season, as this is our first ever bidding war season. Characters are being bid for. Go ahead and follow us at Racial Draft Pod on Twitter, racial.draft on Instagram, Racial Draft on Facebook. And you can always follow me at MTFIII, where I am eclectic. So I am very eclectic, but I try to keep you abreast on what's happening in all the various nerd news and, other things that tickle my fancy. And you can always hit me up if you have racial draft business that you'd like to discuss, or if you have VariantCast business that you'd like to discuss. You can also check me out on Pop Break TV's Goodbye to All That, where I'm sure in the coming weeks we will also discuss Loki, but in a more um, let's say global way, holistic, as it were. We will discuss the entirety of the season. For those of you who don't want to do the week to week bit, check us out there. And yeah, I guess that's where we'll leave it, guys. Until next week, varying away.